I'm Liz Faublas, and this is Currents. Catholics get out the vote across the Brooklyn Diocese.
This government is overreaching and forcing Catholic groups to go against and to revise their theology is outrageous. Thank you. Get involved.
And with just days to go, revisiting the goals of the Fortnight for Freedom. Plus, cutting through the noise to present the truth of the Catholic Church.
There's a whole generation of young people who've grown up. They've heard a lot of negative news about the Catholic Church. Admittedly, some of it's been self-generated, but an awful lot of it is just characteristically unfair.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Well, we are in the home stretch of the Fortnight for Freedom. That, of course, is the 2-week period of prayer and action spearheaded by the U.S. Bishops' Conference. The Fortnight is a response to a number of attacks on religious freedom in this country, chief among them the Department of Health and Human Services contraception mandate. As we've been telling you, the mandate would force most religious organizations to provide contraception, sterilization, and some abortion-inducing drugs in their employee health plans. Here in the Diocese of Brooklyn, Catholics have been called into action. That includes a series of voter registration drives at parishes across Brooklyn and Queens, including Sunday at Our Lady of the Blessed Sacrament in Bayside.
The diocese is running these voter registration drives just because they want Catholics to get involved in the political process, and that is the most simplest way for Catholics to do that. And it's important that Catholics are up to date on the political issues. We don't want our voice to be muted. I feel like it's important for Catholics to be involved because we need to be active in our government. We live in this society, so we should have a voice as well. We can't just leave it up to everyone else.
Please spread the word. Thank you. Vote your faith. Give some.
We really stress that as Catholics we need to not only believe interiorly, but to put our faith into action. And that means being faithful citizens, taking part in the life of society and the nation, and trying to influence, laws, elections, according to what we believe.
What the diocese wants Catholics to consider before going in to vote is just vote your faith. And it's as simple as that, just vote by your faith, right? So we don't tell people who to vote for or what party to vote for, but just simply to vote by your faith, right? Vote as a conscious Catholic.
I'm very concerned about the way our country is going, in the sense that there's so many things that are against our faith that have come to the forefront.
Catholics must get involved and vote against this to send a message.
The freedom of the church is at stake, and prayer is really going to be one of the key things that's going to help us. We have to have politicians motivated to move things in the right direction, but I think one of the things that's going to help them move in the right direction is our prayer.
This Fortnight for Freedom, it has turned out, I think, for our parish to be a very good 2-week period of reflection, because I think we can begin to take for granted some of the important rights that we have, such as religious liberty.
As a result of the Fortnight for Freedom, we'd like Catholics just to pray about the whole religious freedom issue and to just keep themselves educated and updated. And prayer is the most important part of this whole campaign, and prayer is the most important part of our faith as well.
I certainly want to see the country moving in a direction where the religious freedom is preserved. I want to see people served. That's what the Catholic Church is all about, serving people, not just Catholics.
I'm very concerned that our president, in spite of the fact that people have spoken to him, people have text messaged I've text messaged the representatives all the time, and I keep getting the same answer back, that they don't believe the way we do, and no one seems to listen.
Even Catholics who are not practicing should be able to appreciate, on separation of church and state grounds, that this government is overreaching and forcing Catholic groups to go against and to revise their theology is outrageous. Thank you. Get involved.
Well, we will have much more on the Fortnight for Freedom a bit later in the show, but don't go anywhere. There's more currents ahead. Pope Benedict fills an important Vatican post. That story and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Faublis. Pope Benedict has chosen a fellow German to fill one of the Vatican's most prominent posts. Rome Reports has that story.
Benedict XVI has appointed Gerhard Ludwig Müller, who serves as the Bishop of Regensburg, Germany, as the new prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. This is one of the most prestigious positions in the Vatican. It's actually the post Benedict XVI had before being elected Pope. In addition to being the prefect of the Doctrine of the Faith, Müller will also lead the Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei, the Pontifical Biblical Commission, and the International Theological Commission. He'll take on the post held by American Cardinal William Levada. The 76-year-old was appointed in 2005. Müller is the editor of the Pope's 16-volume edition titled Collected Writings of Joseph Ratzinger. He's also published over 400 articles on theology.
Elsewhere, it was a day to remember at the Vatican for 40 metropolitan archbishops as Pope Benedict gave them each a pallium, a special vestment given to bishops who oversee large geographic regions. The ceremony took place, as is typically the case, on the feast of Saints Peter and Paul. Now, among those receiving the pallium, Baltimore Archbishop William Lori, who heads the U.S. Bishops Ad Hoc Committee on Religious Liberty. Just ahead in the show, my interview with Archbishop Lori on the Fortnight for Freedom. Meanwhile, attacks against two churches in Kenya draws strong criticism from the Vatican. We get more from Rome Reports.
The Vatican has condemned the July 1st attacks against two Christian churches in the Kenyan town of Garissa. The attack took place during Sunday Mass and left 17 people dead, with 50 injured. The Vatican spokesperson Federico Lombardi described the attacks as vile, horrible, and disturbing. Lombardi also said that these Sunday attacks by terrorist groups on places of worship has become a particularly effective method for the dissemination of hatred and fear. These attacks occurred simultaneously at two different points in the city of Garissa, a town near the border with Somalia. Lombardi also noted it was necessary to reaffirm and defend religious freedom of Christians and to oppose irresponsible acts that breed hatred among different religions. Since 2010, several countries in Africa, especially Nigeria and Kenya, have been affected by the terrorist attacks of Boko Haram against Christian churches.
In other news, a follow-up to a story we brought you last week. A federal judge has temporarily blocked enforcement of a Mississippi law that could shut down Jackson Women's Health Organization, the only abortion clinic in that state. A restraining order was put in place July 1st, the day the new law took effect. The law requires anyone performing abortions in the state to be an OBGYN with privileges to admit patients to a local hospital. The clinic says the law is designed to put it out of business because those privileges can be difficult to obtain. The court agreed, adding that there is no evidence that safety or health concerns motivated its passage. Republican Governor Phil Bryant has said he wants Mississippi to be, quote, abortion-free. A hearing was set for July 11th to hear the clinic's petition against the law. The New York-based Center for Reproductive Rights helped file the lawsuit. Well, will Archbishop Fulton Sheen become a saint in the near future? A priest in connection with this cause thinks so. Monsignor Stanley Deptula, executive director for the Archbishop Fulton Sheen Foundation, feels that the rapid speed of which Sheen was declared venerable is a strong indicator for his beatification. Sheen's cause for sainthood was opened in 2002. In a teleconference on Friday, Monsignor Deptula said that 3, quote, fully documented alleged miracles attributed to Sheen have been collected. Archbishop Sheen was probably best known as the host of the 1950s television show Life is Worth Living, still shown on religious stations across the country. He was also the director of the Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith, today known as the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, which undertakes missionary work around the world. Sheen was also known for helping a number of prominent people convert to Catholicism, including Ford Motor Company President Henry Ford II and politician Claire Booth Luce. The Vatican is hosting a Catholic film festival this week. Rome Reports has details.
The event is called Mirabile Dictu, which in Latin means wonderful to relate. Nominations for Best Movie include the French film Churchmen, from the United States War of the Vendée, and the Spanish film A Song.
The 3 short films are extraordinary. And we have a film from Spain, it's called A Song, which is a surprising, beautiful little film, full of values. And I think it's a film that the press will like.
This Catholic Film Festival was created by the Polish filmmaker and producer Liana Marabini. It operates under the patronage of the Pontifical Council for Culture, which is presided over by Cardinal Ravasi.
The purpose is to put together, to give more visibility to the makers, filmmakers, but also producers, writers, distributors, broadcasters of Catholic films in general. I think it's very important.
Rome will play host to many of the directors, actors, and producers of the 1,000 movies that were considered. During the festival, a panel of 5 judges will decide the winners from each category.
They are looking for films that leave a trace in the people's souls.
Along with the festival, Catholic filmmakers plan to work with the new evangelization by holding a congress every 6 weeks in a different city to promote their work. It will begin in Rome on July 1st, traveling through Europe and the Americas, visiting a total of 10 different cities.
And finally, the country with the largest number of Catholics is seeing growth in the number of evangelical Christians. From 2000 through 2010, the number of evangelical Christians in Brazil rose from 15% of the population to 22%. According to Brazil's National Statistics Institute, the number of Catholics during that period fell from 74% of the population to 65%. Brazil's Rio de Janeiro will host the next World Youth Day in 2013. That event is taking place a year earlier than normal as Brazil is hosting the World Cup the following year. Stay tuned. There's more currents ahead. Coming up, a critical period for the church in the U.S. We'll get an overview of the Fortnight for Freedom. Welcome back. Well, since the Fortnight for Freedom began, a lot has happened. Last Thursday, a much anticipated decision from the Supreme Court. The High Court ruled that the fine for Americans who do not purchase health insurance is valid as a tax. The decision means lawsuits challenging another controversial provision of the Obama administration's Affordable Care Act could go forward. That said, many dioceses and Catholic entities are suing over the contraception mandate. That measure and other attacks on religious liberty prompted U.S. bishops to call for the Fortnight for Freedom. The 2-week period of prayer and action got underway on June 21st. On that day, a week before the Supreme Court announced its decision, I spoke with Baltimore Archbishop William Lori, who heads the U.S. Bishops Ad Hoc Committee on Religious Liberty. Archbishop Lori, it's such a pleasure to speak with you. We were just talking about how excited we are about the fact that the Fortnight for Freedom is finally here. You and your brother bishops have been planning this event for quite some time. Now, what do you hope will be accomplished by this momentous effort? And I call it an effort just to drive home the significance of the event.
Well, Liz, you're right to call it an effort. And there's really 2 things we have in mind. Number one, in these 14 days leading up to the 4th of July, we're hoping that we'll gather in prayer. Tonight we'll gather in prayer nationally at the Basilica of the Assumption in Baltimore. We'll close the fortnight at the National Shrine in Washington with a large mass as well. And in between time, there'll be prayer in parishes, in homes and parts of on the part of individuals. So prayer is number one. The Lord said, without me you can do nothing. And so if we want to preserve religious liberty, we have to pray and get the strength and the enlightenment to do so. Secondly, education. There is so much to appreciate about the Church's teaching on religious liberty, and there is so much that we need to learn or maybe relearn about our heritage as Americans. And what better time to do this than in the run-up to Independence Day.
Absolutely, and Archbishop, dioceses across the nation planning their own activities. Now, in the spirit of unity, are there specific aspects of the program designed to be the same from state to state? For instance, will there be certain prayers? Will there be certain hymns or homilies that will just span across national lines?
There will be. For example, there is a prayer for religious liberty that the Bishops' Conference has published. It's really a beautiful prayer, various kinds of very nice prayer cards and things of that nature. And so that's number one. Number two, a lot of homily helps. It's never good to have a canned homily, but it is good, and I'm speaking as a homilist myself, to receive some guidance, some points to incorporate into homilies. There are model prayer services, and of course, there is a lot of educational information that's available. But there's also, and this is really very good, a tremendous amount of creativity in the dioceses around the United States. Their plans for the Fortnight can be found on the Fortnight for Freedom website, and I think there's probably 80 or so dioceses that are showing us what they're doing. It's pretty exciting, I'd say.
And Archbishop, I would be remiss if I did not talk about the catalyst for Fortnight and an issue that you have been very vocal on. Now, we're expecting the Supreme Court to hand down a decision on Obamacare, and of course, part of that, the controversial HHS mandate by the end of the month. There are so many possible scenarios, Archbishop. Ultimately, what if the High Court decides not to strike down any part of Obamacare as unconstitutional? Where do we go from there?
One thing to remember is that in the middle of May, a number of Catholic dioceses, universities, hospitals, and publishing houses like our Sunday Visitor filed suit all around the country, specifically focused on the Health and Human Services mandate. And so I think our issue would still be very much alive, because unlike the claims that have been made so far, we are making a First Amendment claim. And so I don't think I'm not a lawyer, of course, but I think that these lawsuits would be all the more important.
And Archbishop, while the mandate is certainly a focus of the Church's concerns, I would like you to explain, this is not the only presumed slight on religious liberty by the government. I mean, this call to action is not simply to address one issue. What else is being addressed? How big is this concern?
Oh, there's a lot of things. For example, we have something called Migration Refugee Services, and it belongs to the Church. It's a great organization that helps victims of human trafficking. We've done a great job, but we're being discriminated against in applying for government contracts because we don't do abortions and we don't hand out condoms. Another thing would be that many, in various states, Catholic adoption and foster care agencies have been driven out of business by the government because they won't place kids with same-sex couples. In Alabama, there's a law which penalizes churches for providing services, Good Samaritan services, to the undocumented. So there are many, many threats to religious liberty. Some of them, most of them are at the state level, but the HHS mandate is the first time the federal government has sought in recent memory to reach inside the Church and try to force us to violate our teaching.
Thank you, Archbishop. I'm so happy that you were able to broaden the scope of the Fortnight for Freedom in that answer. How can the faithful participate in this show of unity? Who should they contact?
First of all, perhaps go on the website of your diocese, see what activities have been planned, and take part in those. Number two, this is something families can do. How important for families to pray together, and how important for parents to educate their children about religious liberty. What a patriotic thing to do. Another thing that ought to happen, I think, is that we should stay in constant touch with our elected representatives, remind them that we, as citizens, expect them to defend our religious liberties, not to compromise them and not to roll them back.
That is the perfect last word. I really do want to thank you for spending some time with us today to talk to us about the significance of the Fortnight for Freedom, which gets underway tonight. And we'll be watching. We'll be airing the Mass right here on net. Thank you once again.
All right. Thanks a million, Liz, and thanks to all your listeners.
You're very welcome. And please be sure to join us Tuesday night when we will talk more about the Fortnight for Freedom in a new interview with Washington Archbishop Cardinal Donald Wuerl. Don't go anywhere. There's more currents after the break. When we return, a fresh perspective on some ancient truths.
We live in a society which people say, nobody's going to tell me what to do. There are no moral absolutes. There's no such thing as truth. That's insane, people. You can't even carry out a coherent society that way.
Finally tonight, the church is trying to make its voice heard during the Fortnight for Freedom. However, doing so can be difficult in a secular world that's looking elsewhere for answers. But Catholics across the country are doing what they can to change that, including the president of the Catholic League, Bill Donohue. Donohue frequently speaks out, both in the media and in public, against attempts to marginalize the church and its people. His latest work comes not via the airwaves, but in the form of a new book, Why Catholicism Matters: How Catholic Virtues Can Reshape Society in the 21st Century. The book has received accolades from Cardinals Timothy Dolan, Edwin O'Brien, and Donald Wuerl, and Philadelphia Archbishop Charles Chaput. We recently had the chance to hear more about Bill Donohue's book when he spoke about it at Pauline Books and Media in Manhattan.
Ignorance can be cured through education. Now, I'm all in favor of education, people. Spent 20 years in education. But if you think you can resolve all of these problems through education, you need an education. I wrote this book because I'm concerned that an awful lot of people who are practicing Catholics don't have enough intellectual ammunition and to embolden them to feel the way they should be proud about the church. I also wrote it for those people who may have one foot out the door, who may, for whatever reason, be somewhat disenchanted. Maybe this will bring them back.
I read the book, and I was very impressed with how positive he was, how articulate about the virtues, and how well he presented the effect that a virtuous living can change society.
We live in a society which people say, I am my own moral arbiter of truth. I make up my own ideas of right and wrong. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. There are no moral absolutes. There's no such thing as truth. There's no external authority. We all make up our ideas willy-nilly. That's insane, people. You can't even carry out a coherent society that way.
I came to tonight's talk because I've always admired Mr. Donohue for his feistiness and for what he spoke about tonight, courage. I think Catholics need courageous people to inspire them to get out there and spread the news.
There are people in the academy in particular who are not interested in logic and reason, empirical evidence. They've made up their minds. And the Catholic Church is hated. Why? A lot of it has to come down to the fact, what I called in secular sabotage, the three most dreaded words in the English language today. Thou shalt not.
I've read about a third of his book so far, which I'm enjoying, and I like the positivity of it as opposed to stating the rules and so on. He gives a lot of reasons why the Catholics do what they do. He also cites, from what I've read so far in the justice section, how good and beneficial the Catholic Church has been to society, not just today, but for all of its existence in history, 2,000 years.
And there's a whole generation of young people who have grown up. They've heard a lot of negative news about the Catholic Church. Admittedly, some of it's been self-generated, but an awful lot of it is just characteristically unfair. I think the Catholic Church is the right answer, not just for Catholics, but for everybody. I want to make it clear, I don't want to impose anything. I believe, as John Paul II said, we're here to propose. We're not here to impose. There's a profound difference. It's kind of hard to get the voice of the Catholic Church out there. There's a cacophony of catcalls coming against us, trying to drown us out. And all I'm simply saying is this: give us a respectful hearing. The Catholic voice is an important voice in a secular society. If people disagree, fine. But don't stop us from getting our message out. We have free speech rights as well.
And Bill Donohue's book, Why Catholicism Matters, is available in bookstores and online and directly from the Catholic League. Well, that is all for tonight. Be sure to tune in on Tuesday night when I will be joined on the phone by Washington Archbishop Cardinal Donald Wuerl to talk about the Fortnight for Freedom and a prayer campaign happening in the Washington Archdiocese. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublas. We leave you tonight with more from the voter registration drive at Our Lady of the Blessed Sacrament Parish in Bayside, Queens. Thank you for watching and have a good night.